Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Amelia Nichole is joining me to talk about her book, Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls. So, welcome.
Hi,
Let's
thanks
talk
for having me.
books. You're welcome. Let's start with the title. That's a title, Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls.
It took me 2 years to come up with that title. And I've had comments on that where it's like, it's really long. And I'm like, yes. But every other variation under the sun did not work. It was not perfect. And as soon as I came up with that one, I was like, finally, I have a title. Because the very first rendition of the book is the very first draft. It was called Rise of the Shadow Lord. And that was the title for, I would say, the first 10 years that I was working on this series. And it occurred to me while working on what was supposed to be book one, Rise of the Shadow Lord, that I needed to expand on the beginning. There was like this beginning 10 chapters that was kind of the lead up to the main storyline. And it was rushed. So I was like, I'll just expand it a bit. And pretty soon I had a whole entire novel. And so I was like, okay, so it's 2 books. That's great. But I'm going to need to now have a new title. And so that's why it took me 2 years to come up with a new title, because it had always been The Rise of the Shadow Lord. And so now that's book 2. And we also have book 3 that I also have because, much like where I was seeing that their first 10 chapters were needed a little more expansion, as I was getting into book 2, I realized this is also 2 books still. So after that, we have the Reign of Shadows, Rebellion of Light. So
Nice.
still
Those
long
are some
titles.
great titles.
So it's Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls, it's book 1. Rise of the Shadow Lord is book 2. And book 3 is going to be Reign of Shadows, Rebellion of Light. So sticking with the theme of long titles.
Yeah, no, I think you have to at that point. So, why the ambassadorial halls? I'm guessing there's something about politics.
So the Ambassadorial Halls is where this novel is set. And it's a unique setting in that all of the different representatives from the different countries in my story all live in the Ambassadorial Halls. So that adds a lot of tension and intrigue when you have these 2 kind of rival families that have to live together. They have to eat meals together. And you have that's kind of the main setting for the book, is the Ambassadorial Halls, and that's kind of one of the important parts. And the shadows, there is a lot of treachery and intrigue that happens in the Ambassadorial Halls. And so and shadows is kind of a theme throughout the books. One of the unique things about the world building in the story is when a person dies, they either become a shadow or a spirit. And so when someone refers to someone's shadow, they're talking about them being kind of a shady character, that they're the choices that they make decide whether they are a dark spirit or a light spirit. And so that kind of is alluded to a lot in the language and the way that people perceive the world in the world of Valamir.
Oh, wow. So, let's talk about what the book is about.
So I can read you guys the blurb.
Sure.
My favorite quote from this book is, "Traitors and spies lie in the shadows of the ambassadorial halls." To kind of give you an idea of the kind of things that you can find in this book, you can find steam-powered vigilantes, elemental powers, and lots of court intrigue. So Sihara is an only child that was born without any elemental abilities that is common to her people. She always expected to be the end of her family's lineage, but now her father has the chance to secure an end to a whole century of war against the ruthless Animalian Empire with an alliance to their neighboring country. She just has to marry Sebastian, who is a highborn merchant with a very complicated history, to keep her house from going extinct so that her father can make that alliance. Jaden leads a double life as the rich and charming son of the Lord Ambassador, the rival to Sihara's father, and is the leader of a secret steam-powered society of vigilantes. When he uncovers evidence that threatens the very foundation of the alliance, Jaden and Sihara have to work together to defeat the traitors before they destroy the alliance between their two countries. And then all the way deep in the inhospitable outlands on the other side of the world, Milo, who is an innocent Animalian exile, he has to steal back a powerful artifact from Bandit, who seeks to use it for evil. When an unlikely band of misfits join his quest, he has to overcome his fears to save his new friends and stop this mad bandit king. So if you like the Tara Grace's Elven Alliance or J. Kitchen's of Magic Maid series, I think you would really like this book series.
Wow, there's a lot going on in there. And this is only what's going on in book 1. Wow.
Yes. So
Go ahead.
Yeah, so book 1 is actually being published on my blog, so it's actually available for free, so you can actually follow along as I'm publishing the chapters. I think chapter 10 is going to drop on Monday. So we're just starting to get into the really interesting stuff, I think. I think by chapter 4, it starts to really pick up.
Oh, wow. Do you want to do the excerpt now, or do you want to talk some more about it?
Yeah, I could start by sharing. I'm going to share an excerpt from each of the different point of views so you guys can kind of meet the characters and see what kind of adventures that they're going on.
All right, go for it. I'm going to mute myself so I don't accidentally interrupt you. Let the good stories roll.
Just going to get a little bit of water here before I get started.
We allow that. We like our authors all very hydrated.
Okay. Where in the world did I put my shoes? Sarah searched her cozy window reading nook and found a few empty teacups and abandoned novels, but no shoes. The twin moons of peace poured purple moonlight into her room. "We are late," Sebastian's muffled voice calls from behind her door. "Pressuring me will not make my shoes appear any faster." The most important event of the century would start without them if she didn't find her only pair of red shoes. Sarah had auctioned off so many of her things to raise funds for the war, she didn't have another pair of red shoes, and she didn't have time to change to another dress. She wouldn't dare risk a scandal by wearing mismatched shoes. "Easy, why can't you put them where they belong?" Sebastian made an exasperated noise, somewhere between a sigh and a groan. "At least have your lady-in-waiting help you." She hated when he used the goddess's name in vain. "I already let Noelle go to the festival, so unless you want to come in here and help me, you're going to have to be patient." She chuckled at the thought of the thrashing he would receive from her guardian Michel if Sebastian were to enter her room, even if he was her fiancé. She tucked a stray piece of dark hair behind her ear. Her elaborate updo wasn't as tidy as the other highborn. She had inherited her mother's curly Tanzino Republic hair. It just wouldn't stay put, no matter how many pins she put in it. "There's nothing funny about being late, dearest." When I came back from the party last night, did I read a book on my bed or by my desk? Wait, did I get a cup of tea first? She maneuvered around the tall stacks of journals, diaries, and chronicles with practiced ease. Her fondness for old court languages had taken over her room. At last, Sihara found her shoes and a teacup sitting on a side table in a forgotten corner. Aha! Slipping on her shoes, Sihara bounded for the door. The ancient builders of the Ambassadorial Halls had decorated the corridor with a mosaic of granite, shells, and polished stone, depicting scenes of peace and prosperity. Sebastian looked fit to burst. but one glance at her imposing guardian Michelle calmed him. "You're beautiful, as always." Sebastian offered his arm to her as any gentleman would. The gesture felt more possessive than courteous. "But we're nearly 15 minutes late." "You know, the way you obsess about time is not healthy. Dr. Quinto said the stress could lead you to an early grave." And the last thing Sihara needed was a fiancé whose ambition drove him into the ground before their wedding. Michelle followed them at a discreet distance, as silent as a Namir jaguar on the prowl. A mineralite approached them from around the corner. The man's faded garb spoke of his long days in the sun, and his soot-smeared face spoke plainly that his occupation was that of a steam carriage driver. "What are you doing here?" Sebastian asked. "Ah, the stablemaster sent me to fetch you since you're 15 minutes late." Sebastian groaned. "Mineralite has provided a carriage to escort you to the festival. Now, if you will follow me." Sebastian gave her a sharp glance and whispered, "No one, certainly no mineralite, would have been sent if we'd been ready at the appointed time." Creator help her, Sebastian would strain her patience tonight. "But there's no law forbidding his presence here." Sebastian tisked. "Priorities, dear, priorities." He turned to the driver. "You should remember this day. No common mineralite has walked these halls." The mineralite sneered. "In Mineral, we've got better wages and less spending on ostentatious things like this." Sebastian interrupted. "You would do well to keep your opinions to yourself, driver." "Am I the only one trained in diplomacy?" Sihara shot Sebastian a look. "Actually, I appreciate your candor. We've seen the benefits of the reforms you're implementing in your country." The driver raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Don't encourage him," Sebastian groaned. Sihara ignored him. "Yes, the Elementary Council has appointed worker representatives so we can hear directly from the people." The driver laughed. "Ah, what an elementary way of thinking. Rather than give up your glittering halls, you raise up a few choice people to keep the rest in line, with the hopes they too will get their turn." Sarah frowned. "That's not what—" Sebastian squeezed her arm. "You better leave the diplomacy to the Taj." Sarah would do nothing of the sort, but she would be more discreet. "When was the last time I spoke freely with a mineralite that wasn't part of the Lord Ambassador's family or staff? A year? 2? In the open air of the stables, the frosty fall night spoke of an even more frigid winter. Sarah gasped at the sight of the mineralite steam carriage. Bronze lace formed the outer shell, and underneath, a thin sheet of crystal allowed the onlooker to peer into the inner workings of the machine, while also keeping sand and small stones from clogging the gears. The driver patted his prized carriage. Such meticulous attention to detail is the sign of a master mineralite blacksmith. I pity any elementary who dares to compare himself. Forget the scenic route, and I might forgive your blunders. Sebastian tossed a pouch of shill at the surprised driver. Get us to the Twin Moon Festival in 21 minutes, and I'll pay you double this amount. Yes, Sihara. Oh, now he's calling people by their title. As with most people, the driver's disdain evaporated as soon as he got his hands on the money. Michelle took a seat next to the driver, vigilant for any trouble. Sebastian offered his hand to help Sihara into the carriage. Now we'll be perfectly on time. Sihara leveled him with a glare and helped herself inside. So maybe someone notices we're late. Is it worth all the stress and rushing about? Do you have any idea how adorable you look? Sebastian dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand. Stop worrying. My family lives long. We do not die of trivial things like stress. Not our station. The war cannot touch us. After a series of clicks, clunks, and whistles, the steam carriage lurked forward. The steam exhaust reminded Sihara of the heavy exhalation of a riding animal, and the rhythmic sound of the steam engine akin to a beating heart. Just because the Animalians have not set their sights on the Ambassadorial Halls does not mean they will not try. Sarah let her gaze drift towards the window. How many times have we argued about this? Sebastian grumbled. The war is a matter for the commoners and the military to worry about. Regardless of your opinions on our current situation, I worry about your health. If she didn't get married before her upcoming birthday, her family would lose everything, and our uncle would become the ambassador. The same uncle who vowed to stop the alliance with the Mineralites after his daughter's death. I worry about you. I'm not always available to escort you to market and such, with my responsibilities as they are. Once we are married, you will be guarded by a full troop of guards at all time. I will not risk losing you like I lost. Sebastian's voice faltered for a moment. My late wife. Sarah softened. I know you loved her very much. My cousin was like a sister to me. However, she died 10 years ago, and times have changed. You're worried about the Animalians. I thought you would approve the additional protection. Sebastian picked imaginary dust off of his suit. A dark mood had settled over the cab of the steam carriage. The military has spared what few men they can to guard the Ambassadorial Halls. There's no reason to burden me with any more frivolous guards when they should be out fighting the Animalians. You'll be safe in these troubling times. I've given you my word. Even if you have to lock me in a tower and set a dragon to guard me? The words came out sharp. Dragon. The glimmer of mischief in his blue eyes matched his telling smirk. Don't tempt me. Even Sihara had to laugh. She could almost picture it now. Sebastian leading a dragon by a leash. Have I ever told you that your laugh is like music to my ears? Sebastian asked. Why, yes, you have. Sarah's eyes darted away from Sebastian. His compliments would be more flattering if they weren't so cliché and often repeated. Her lack of elemental abilities made her an undesirable wife. Sebastian could somehow overlook this fact that their children may not have an elemental ability like her. He kept his reasons to himself, a habit which Sihara wished she could help him break. Don't do that, Sebastian said, gripping his seat as a sharp turn almost toppled the carriage. Don't do what? Sarah worried they'd crash if the driver didn't slow. They made the steam carriage to travel over paved roads. The dirt trail was better suited to her water buffalo's steady stride. Don't look at the ground. I cannot see your charming face, Sebastian winked. How did I fall for that one again? Oh, stop it. But why? Sebastian reached across the space dividing them and grasped her bare hand. You're making me blush. Sarah fought the urge to pull her hand away from his gloved grip. Always had an impetuous grip on her shoulder, her hand, or her arm. Perhaps that is my intention, Sebastian grinned. He cut a handsome figure in the shadows of the carriage, with his dark hair and pale skin several shades lighter than her own. Sebastian. Sarah wanted to scold him, but the rest of the words caught in her throat when he rubbed small circles in the back of her hand. Even in the privacy of the carriage, the intimate gesture made her uncomfortable. She put her hand on top of his and slowly pulled her other hand away. So, what are you looking forward to most at the festival? It'll be my first time watching the traveling circus of the rising sun. Sebastian frowned at her rebuff. I don't know if I can choose between the eclectic little shops or the fine art. Though, I did recently purchase a new table which could use a sculpture or a vase, so perhaps the little shops. The carriage cleared the trees, and the dance of the fiery and aquatic moons became visible through the window. The appearance of both moons is not a sight most will live to see twice. Sarah wished she'd explain how the sight made her feel. It was as if someone had opened her eyes to the great chasm above her head. The sky opened like the mouth of a giant showing its teeth in the form of moons. One tiny bite and the universe would swallow her whole. How big could her problems be in the grand scheme of the universe? She was just a tiny speck on the surface of a planet with a thin skin of atmosphere. A blood cell, the body of a planet who danced in the heavenly court of the Creator. They rounded a bend in the dirt road, and all at once the Twin Moon Festival revealed its splendor. Paper lanterns drifted delicately through the air, representing every color of the spectrum. Everyone wore their best clothes, each trying to outdo the other. Along the main street, vendors, artists, and musicians had set up shop. Candlelight flickered inside the brightly colored elementary tents, reminding Sarah of the puppet shows which had entertained her in her youth. The brick-and-mortar mineralite shops must have been built days before the festival. The artificial light shone like beacons in the night, with delightful treasures which you find inside. The screech of the brakes ruined the moment. And that is the end of part 1. You can read part 2 of chapter 1 on my website. And then I can go ahead and start reading the excerpt from chapter 2 so that you guys can get introduced to Jaden. Are you ready for that?
I am.
So this chapter is called An Explosive Meeting. It was ever present as the black fog, constant as the quiet click of clockwork, and as dangerous as a glint in your enemy's eyes. Fear. Fear lined the streets. Fear filled the air between one man and another. Fear kept the children up at night, wondering what horrors the madmen would invent next. Mineralites did not shake hands. They tipped their hats, but not for fear of germs, but so they could have their other hand on their weapon. No one could say, with any certainty, when the seeds of distrust had been sown. Was it after the clockwork machines attacked the capital, when the fog rolled in from the factories? Was it the time disease swept over the kingdom, and no one could explain the strange particularities of how it picked its victims? Any number of tragedies could have triggered the downward spiral of the Mineralite Society, and they were irrevocably different because of it. It would not be an easy feat to forge an alliance but cross this chasm, which Mineralites created to insulate themselves from danger. But Jaden would not let a black market ring selling weapons to the enemy ruin his kingdom's slim chance at winning the war. He hoped the peace that would come after the alliance and the resolution of the war would give his people a chance to heal their wounds. The crisp air served as a relief from the last sweltering summer heat wave. He suppressed a chuckle as the elementi around him drew their cloaks tighter, cursing the change of seasons. He was Mineralite, and the cold was a welcome friend. After spending his days wearing light shirts and trousers, Jaden embraced the opportunity to don his vest. It made concealing his weapons and various personal effects much easier. A flash of light on the roof across the street caught his eye. His Scarlet Society operatives were in place. The bag full of cash made his shoulder ache, and he couldn't wait for this mission to be over. He couldn't risk scaring off the smugglers by sending in one of his operatives with a fake identity. Few, if any, of the nobles sympathetic to the Scarlet Society would be willing to put their reputation on the line by buying back-market weapons. So tonight, he would play the part of a weapons buyer. Belladonna stood at the entrance of the blacksmith's inn. She wore a sleeveless black tunic that showed her ebony skin. She put out her smoking reed when she saw him approach. "I'm Carmen. The big guy's waiting for you in the back. They will test your resolve before they talk business. The password is Fireshot." "Subtle." Jaden stepped inside and scanned the crowd. Rough-looking men stared back. Whether it was the effect of the rare red moon or the depressing fact that they were losing after a century of war, everyone was feeling a little worse for wear. Dark eye bags and a little dirt under the nails were almost as in fashion as the hats they wore. The barkeeper eyed them. "Northern Elementi woman and a tan Mineralite. We are a curious duo." Jaden took a seat. "Nice bar. Real bloodwood is scarce. Must cost you a fortune." The barkeep frowned. "You gonna order something?" "I'm here to try the Fireshot." "Even you don't have the currency for that kind of top-shelf drink," the barman sneered at him. "Besides, we won't want your dirty sunken hands to contaminate it." Sunken. A slur in old Mineralite that meant lower, less than. All because his parents decided not to allow the madmen who passed for doctors to tinker with his genetics. Jaden wished people would invent novel ways to insult him instead of falling back on old cliches. "How dare you insult my client?" Belladonna hissed and rose to her feet. Before things get ugly, an old man grabbed Belladonna's shoulder. "Please forgive Alex. He gets protective of the liquor. Let's get that drink for you, my lord." The old man had a limp. Jaden could tell he was an Elementi, but couldn't replace his republic of origin. The old man led them down a winding hallway until they found a door, and knocked in a specific rhythm. A slot opened to show a tough set of eyes. "Lord Jaden Calistine, future Lord Ambassador, is here to try the Fireshot." Clockwork door clicked and groaned as it opened. An Elementi man opened the Mineralite door. The criminals succeed where the politicians fail. Crates stood stacked in the corner, filled with weapons, no doubt. The door locked behind them, and a jolt of not quite fear shot down Jaden's spine. "I need to get out more often." The leader motioned for Jaden to take a seat at the makeshift desk. He was a Mineralite, genetically altered to have straight black hair, pale skin, and blue eyes. The old man poured a dark black drink with 2 waiting glasses. Jaden dipped a poison tester stick into the drink. One can't be too careful. The Mineralite laughed, an unforgiving hoarse laugh that rattled his bones. "Thinking or not, you are a Mineralite." The poison tester came back clear. The leader raised his cup. Jaden took a sip of the intimidating glass. As the drink rolled over his palate, he could pick up notes of the bitter juice of the tocopod, hints of smoky macara and sweet dari. He made a contemplative noise, and then the heat hit him like a wave. Prosecco peppers. The leader set down his now empty glass. You haven't tasted anything till you've tried something with Prosecco peppers in it. They wake up your soul. Jaden could not speak. This must be the initiation Belladonna alluded to. He downed the glass, blinking back tears. His mouth burned, his ears burned, and the warmth traveled from his head down to his toes. "Ha! I'm surprised you could finish the drink," the man chuckled again, and took a sheet of paper from his jacket. "You're buying a stock of weapons that will give you an edge that you need to keep yourself and your assets safe when the Animalians attack." What kind of weapons are we talking about? Jaden picked up the document. "I don't buy clockwork weapons, as they tend to turn on their owner." The man grunted in annoyance. "You get what you pay for. We don't discuss the details. Carmen should have already given you a good idea of what we're selling here." Jaden set the bag of cash on the table and waited while the leader counted the currency. He smiled. Jaden returned a smile until he pulled a gun. And that is end of part 1 of chapter 2.
Do you want to do the excerpt from chapter 3? Or okay, cool.
Yeah,
Go
are
for
you
it.
interested in that?
Yeah, no, I'm I told you this before we started, but I'm an audiobook addict, so I'm very much enjoying this. I'm like a kid in a
glad.
candy store, so yeah, no, please continue.
So this one is chapter 3, and it is called The One Left Behind. Milo woke with a gasp, his heart racing from another nightmare of a creature of shadows chasing him through a labyrinthian ruin. The afternoon sun shone through the windows and lit the stifling log cabin. All the hunters left without waking me. Again. He brushed the straw from his hair. They shunned him because he had startled the Harnarch during the hunt. But it wasn't entirely his fault. That branch really did look like a snake from where he lay hidden. Milo changed into his hunting gear. A motley assemble of tanned hides and furs made up his clothing. He stuffed his ill-fitting shoes with more straw to plug up the holes in the toes. He tied his possum mask around his head. His pata had carved it out of wood, after he had been exiled from Animalia. It was one of the few things he still had from his family. The other was the healing power stone that never left his neck. Stepping out of the cabin, he squinted his eyes and stumbled towards the mess hall. His head ached from oversleeping and dehydration. Hopefully, they've saved some breakfast for me. Philo would have noticed he was missing and set something aside for him surely. The villagers who were too young or too old to hunt were busy preparing the twin moon feast in the mess hall. Anything left from breakfast was being repurposed into a dish for the feast. Milo, I have prepared some traveling supplies for you." Vila's hunched figure wobbled towards him. Because they shared the same copper-brown eyes, Vila believed Milo must be a distant relative of hers. She treated him like a doting grandmahi, even though they had only met last year. "I'll take whatever you have for breakfast," Milo offered a pained smile. "The hunters decided they didn't need my help today." "I told them to let you sleep. Here's something for you to eat on your way out." Vila pressed the pack into his hands. Milo's heart sank. It wasn't my fault." Vila shook her head and grabbed his arm to steady herself. "You must leave this village and find somewhere else to hide. Your presence puts everyone at risk." You can't just throw me out to the Beowulfs while the twin moons are in the sky." "You'll survive." Vila turned him around and pushed him towards the door. "Take this and leave. Speak to no one." Milo shouldered the pack and gritted his teeth. As soon as he became inconvenient, people claimed to be his friends abandoned him. He should have known better than to think he had a place in this village. He should have trusted his gut and found a new place to stay before the twin moons rose. Now it was too late. The nearest village was at least weeks' travel from here. Traveling while the two moons rose during the night was a death sentence. Every predator, dragon, Nimur, and far worse would be on the hunt for tasty little snacks like him. He had to prove he was worth the occasional trouble he caused for bringing something back to the village larder. He would beg the village chief for forgiveness with a peace offering, and an offer to hunt alone. They didn't have to spend any time hunting with him. He'd risk life and limb for a place in this village. Around the village, carefully cultivated living barrier of brambles wore the colors of fall, contrasting with the towering evergreen forest. Milo pushed against the long thorns and tangle of rose and berry bushes. His leather braces and fur cuffs protected his body. He tangled the barrier behind him and allowed his eyes to adjust to the dappling light of the understory. A loud crash noise caused Milo to throw himself to the ground. Keelan came tumbling down from the tree branches. He quickly stumbled up from the ground and brushed his clothes off. I'm good. Nothing's broken. Milo stalked towards him. What in the world were you doing up there? Where is your mahi? Keelan turned a deep shade of red. She said I'm old enough to hunt and forage for myself. Milo knelt to his level. What'd you do? Keelan looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I kind of ruined all of Mother's flour by crushing her eggs in the bag. The entire village had heard Helen yell at Keelan for breaking something or ruining something with his thoughtlessness. This time Helen must have sent him out to replenish the supplies instead of keeping around to wreak more havoc. It was one thing to be ridiculed and shunned for being the village fool, something which Milo unfortunately knew all about. But Keelan also had the unfortunate fate of being the son of the village leader. Hey, buddy, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but there isn't anything worth hunting that's close to the village. There's a nest up there. I'm just sure it's full of eggs. Keelan rubbed his elbows and pointed. The tree had no low-hanging branches. The old trees of this forest made the younger trees stretch up higher and higher in search of sunlight. Milo shielded his eyes against the harsh light of the sun. Yeah, I see it, but that's a strix nest. They'll help you keep the vermin down around the village. As long as you don't mess with their young, they're harmless. But if you try to steal their eggs, they will kill you. Keelan's shoulders slumped. Can't do anything right. I know the feeling. I think the village wants me to leave. Keelan's eyes widened. But there isn't any village within a week's journey. You'd have to survive during the night. And that's impossible. That's why I'm going to prove I can be an asset to the village by bringing back food. Keelan offered a conspiratorial grin. You know, 2 hunters are better than 1. Milo punched the boy on the shoulder. That's the spirit. Well, let's go find something harmless that can't hunt us back. Has your pata taught you to identify animal spoor? Keelan nodded. I'll help you look. Milo glided noiselessly through the forest, followed by Keelan's occasional slip-up. It wasn't the end of the world to be scared off wherever they were hunting. If they found a high-traffic area, they could set up a trap and lie in wait. That's when the sounds of wildlife stopped. And that is the end of part 1 of chapter 3.
Wow, that was fun.
We've
not done excerpts quite like that on here, and I have to say it was new, and I hope other people enjoyed it as much as I did. So just to reiterate that this was part 1 of each of those 3 chapters, so there's more to read and experience if you go over to the site, which we'll have the links in the show notes in the description. So, because it's a long URL. So you can just click and go. But now we've got lots to talk about. All right. So it sounds like we've got a lot of magic and things going on here. So I heard the elementes. So I'm assuming people with elemental power, and it's and the fact that Sebastian was speaking non-complimentary about it. I take it that there's other forms of magic that he would find more appropriate or for yeah. So it sounds like there's some kind of magical hierarchy, just in the way that he was talking about it.
So the Elementi, you're absolutely right. They have elemental powers. So they have the ability to control elements that are outside of themselves with their elemental dust. And you get to see that in the Circus of the Rising Sun. You kind of get a demonstration of a bunch of different elemental abilities. So that one was a lot of fun to write. And the mineralites are different. And like their name suggests, they actually get their power from minerals or gemstones. And you'll get to see that a lot more of that in part 2 of Jaden's chapter, The Explosive Meeting. And so they have different abilities that modify themselves. So speed, strength, ability to fly. So more like your kind of superhero powers. The mineralites have those. And then the Animalians have their own special set of abilities. More along the lines of like what you would think of like animal senses. So better reflexes, better night vision, sense of hearing, sense of smell, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So why is there is is one set of powers viewed as like better than another, or is he
The
just a snob?
elementee, yes, yes, definitely. That can definitely cover multitude of things with Sebastian. Um, he definitely believes that the elementee are superior, and the mineralites believe that they are superior, just as a general rule of thumb. And so there is that tension between them where Sihara wants to kind of smooth things over. She wants there to be diplomacy, there wants there to be peace. And Sebastian is like, I'm a superior being. Why would I go down to their level?
Yeah, I definitely caught that. So do all these different types of powers, do they all come from the same source, or how do we end up having three different types of, this almost sound like three different magic systems?
Yes. So each one of the different countries has their own, because they are kind of different people. So if you think of the difference between like dwarves or elves, that would kind of be analogous to this world where they all are humanoid, but there are very distinctive races. And what's really fun about this world is just how deep the lore goes, and how you kind of, that even the characters themselves, they have their own lore and backstory, how they think that the powers work. And then there's the ancient history of how do the powers actually come to be. And part of the series is kind of unlocking that hidden history of where do the power stones that they mine in the mountains come from? Where does the elemental dust come from? Is it something they're born with? Is it something environmental? And there's like all these different kind of layers that they get to uncover as the series goes on.
Oh, so you're not going to tell us now because that's something you have to read to find out later.
Yes, well, because there's going there. I can tell you what they believe now. So they
Yes,
believe
please.
that so currently, as it is, the elementee are born with elemental dust in their veins, and so to control water, for example, they will actually have kind of like what looks like pixie dust that they are able to, with their fingers. It will then be able to interact with that water, and if it's a container of water, they could. That's one of the weapons that the those who can control water. If you have like a container with water in it, they can control that. Same with
So they
wind
generate
controllers.
the dust out of their,
Mhm.
and that's what, oh, cool. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Go on. That's very
No, yeah,
cool.
absolutely. And so the power stones are activated through a mental connection. And the mineralites actually genetically modify all of their children so that they can be able to use a specific type of power stone. And with the mineralites, what kind of power stone you use can determine kind of what job that you have or place that you have, because everyone has to serve time in the mines regardless of your station, because that's the main source of their power. So they need to make sure that they have enough people that are mining for these minerals, and that whatever you find, however much you find, you get to take like the top choice for your children. And so that gives kind of a little bit of a luck of the draw and makes it highly competitive to do the mining, because it does determine what kind of power stone that your children will get, and therefore kind of their hierarchy in society.
So if your grandparents had one type of stone and then you go and mine another type of stone, you can actually switch your, that's very cool.
Yeah, so it's not so the power stone and what you're genetically modified to be compatible with. So somebody who is like a duke, for example, he's going to have more resources and access to more powerful power stones, whereas a commoner, they're probably going to get used to the access to the most common powers, maybe speed or strength. That's going to allow them to do more common jobs. Whereas like a anti-gravity stone, those are more rare and usually exclusively for the military, and they don't live very long. Um, so there is a very ruthless nature to the Mineralite Society. I like to kind of describe it if you were to mix the Victorian era with the industrial era, but with like steampunk technology and mad inventors. So it's a lot of fun, very cutthroat.
Sounds it. And I mean, so the magic can exist alongside the steampunk elements, and they don't. There's often a trope in like fantasy where there's some kind of technology is that the technology doesn't work when the magic is present or extremely
Mhm.
active. Is that something that you play with as well?
No, actually, because the mineralites, their powers are specifically having to do with modifying themselves and changing properties of themselves. It doesn't interact with the technology, but like elemental powers, especially like water, uh, earth, those can be a counter to the more higher technology of the mineralites. Kind of one of the reasons why the elementi don't have as much technology is because they're able to change the world around them. So if they want a house, they just go ask someone to control Earth. Can you go build me a house? And so they don't need that same level of technology to compete and to be able to build their society.
I see. I see. And you said the elementes and the mineralites and the animalites. Did I get that right?
Yeah, the
They're
Animalians.
Animalians, that's it. They're all from different countries. So which ones are from the countries that Sahara's from? Is Sahara and Sebastian from the same country? Or are they from different country? Does that also play into his snobbery?
So Sihara and Sebastian are both Elementi. They're from different republics because the Elementi is broken up into four kind of distinctive regions. Sebastian is from the Italian region, which is kind of more Gothic Spain. And then Sahara is actually a child of two republics. So she's from the Vindish Republic and the Tanzino Republic. And I think that what's fun about that is the Vindish Republic is kind of Victorian Indian, and Tanzino is, I want to call it like Latina Wild West. So she's got an interesting mix for her kind of cultures. And the Tanzino people, their whole country has been conquered by the Animalians. So they're all refugees. And so part of Sebastian's snobbery is the Italians in general think of themselves kind of better than all the other republics. And so you'll kind of notice if there's any other Italian elementi, uh, they kind of are all a little bit of snobs. Which is a lot of fun to play with the different banter and political intrigue that we get into in this novel. And then Jaden's a mineralite, so he has a power stone, but he is not genetically modified. And as you can see just from the first chapter, not make him very popular with the other mineralites who think of that as their main source of superiority to the other countries. And like there's tons of details on the Animalian side as well. That's Milo is the only Animalian character that you guys have been introduced to so far.
No, very cool. So, and Jaden is he's also in the same, I guess, city where Sahara and Sebastian are.
Yeah, they're all in the Ambassadorial Halls. So Sihara is the Elementi ambassador's daughter, and Jaden is the Mineralites ambassador's son.
Gotcha.
So they're the children of the ambassadors. And so what's really fun about that is because their countries are rivals, but they've grown up together, they have this kind of playful rivalry, banter, but also kind of they're a little bit apart from the other countries. And uh, Jaden sees the mineralites and he's like, in the beginning of the chapter, you see he's like, we're not the best. We've got some improvements to make. And kind of what's fun about Sahara's journey is that we kind of get to see her go from, I mean, we're not the best, but we're better than other people to, oh, maybe we're all just kind of on the same level. maybe we're not better than the mineralites. And
So
so that's a
go
fun
ahead.
journey. And so basically, you have the mineralites and the elementi have to make an alliance together. But they've been rivals for basically since their countries started. And 100 years ago, the Animalians, who are on the so that you have basically Animalians on one side, Elementi in the middle, and the Mineralites on the other side. So the Animalians have been fighting a war against the Elementi and the Mineralites for over 100 years by this point, and the Elementi and the Mineralites are starting to lose. And so they're like, okay, some of the people are like, we're going to have to work together if we're going to stop this evil empire from conquering everything.
And who's this evil empire?
So the Animalians are a race of people, and their magic is more of like a low, what you consider kind of a low fantasy. They have enhanced senses and abilities, reflexes, things like that. And their society is very caste system based. So they have like main tribes that you can be sorted into. And then you take that animal spirit as kind of your guide. And they all wear the masks that they make themselves of that animal. And they're very private. So once you come of age, you always wear your mask. And you're taking on a new identity within your tribe. And so they're very committed to that concept. Basically, the reason is in this world, they have kind of a unified religion between all of the different races. And 100 years ago, a crazy sandstorm obliterated most of the rainforest where the Animalians live. And so the priests of the old ways, of the old religion, they came in and said, this is because our war god is angry with us. Our chief god, Tizin, is angry with us for not conquering and making war and being the superior race, which you'll notice a theme with this is each of the different people think that they are better than all the other races. And so that's a theme that I really like to explore because I think that when you get into generalizing any one particular group of people, when you start dehumanizing them and seeing them as the big bad guy, that's when you start to justify doing bad things. And I think that that's something that is I wanted to explore from a bunch of different facets. So even though the Animalians are this big evil empire that's trying to conquer everything, you also have Milo, who's this innocent animal in exile, and you get to know their culture through him. So you kind of get to see multiple facets that they're not just all one big society that's this one big bad guy, even though that's how the Elementi and the Mineralites feel. And the Animalians are based on the Aztecans, kind of the jaguar warriors and things like that. So that's kind of gives you an idea of the way that their society is. They're more low tech in a way, but they're also they're really good at surviving. And so there's a lot of them. So the sheer numbers, their cleverness, their ability to be able to survive, and their ferocity is what really makes them a formidable enemy against even the technologically superior mineralites. Um, the Animalians have they use strategy and they use their superior senses and reflexes and to be able to put people in situations and to engineer the perfect ambush and the perfect battle. So that makes a lot of fun to actually write the fight scenes and the different war and battle scenes.
Sounds like it. So let's talk about these ambassadorial halls. Is that it's so it's definitely it sounds like it's more than just a building. And like geographically, like is it like somewhere in the middle of all of this? And like why are all of them ambassadors there, and it sounds like since Jaden and Sihara grew up there, that they've been there a long time, those ambassadors. Just want to get like more of a sense of like what that is, how that came about, and well, we know they're there because they're supposed to be getting some kind of alliance together, but is that have they been there for their entire lives trying to get this treaty, these two sides to work together, or is that? Yes, I just want
So
to understand that a bit more.
the Ambassadorial Halls is set in the neutral lands where each one of the countries meet. And it's also right up against what I call the outlands, which are the wild lands where they always exile people that any of the different countries. If they don't like you, they'll exile you. Because the outlands are incredibly dangerous, and most people don't make it the first week. So it's their way of being able to not have to execute people, but also not have them be in their countries anymore. And if they survive, good for them. But it's not very common to be able to survive in the outlands. So the neutral lands are right up against there. So it's not a land that anyone owns. It's kind of like a little pocket right before you get into the dangerous part of the outlands. It was founded at the beginning of, like, for as far back as they can remember, the ambassadorial halls have existed. And there's a fourth race I haven't even told you about yet, and that is the followers of the creator. They are crystalline beings. They are the most alien of the different kind of creatures and races that I have on this world. And they are the ones who founded the ambassadorial halls. And they're the ones who invited an ambassador from each one of the countries to come and live at the ambassadorial halls so that they may have peace, and they may be able to negotiate different, as things come up, they may be able to negotiate different treaties. And so there's always is an ambassador from each of the countries that lives at the ambassadorial halls so that they can do mediations between the different countries, because they're all very different people. And the followers of creator saw that there was going to be this constant conflict between these different cultures, their different perspectives. And so Jaden's dad, Kern, Lord Ambassador Kern, he got the post about, I think I have it as, I want to say 13 years ago. It was when Jaden was 11. There was an assassination. So his uncle was assassinated, and his dad had to uproot his whole family and go and live at the ambassadorial halls, learn how to be an ambassador, and it was just like totally changed the trajectory of Jaden's life. Because before, his dad was like a hobby archaeologist. He was like the youngest son, who had a lot of cash to burn, could do whatever he wanted. And so that changed Jaden's life of kind of that free spirited, he could do what he wanted, didn't have to go to bed on time, got to play with whoever, whether they were commoner or noble, to suddenly being thrust into this world of cutthroat politics. He had to go to a finishing school to be able to learn all of these skills. And that comes through a lot in a lot of his chapters, in that part of the reason why I think he founded the Scarlet Society in the first place is because he had this outsider perspective on it, and he wasn't he didn't just run in highborn or noble circles. So he understands the plight and the frustrations of the common people as well. So he has sympathy for them as well.
Wow. So, and I guess the
The Animalians.
that's it. I was like the A one. So they're there too,
So
and they have some ambassadors as well, even though there's the war is
they
still going
did.
on.
They did 100 years ago. Their ambassador left. So even though they
Okay.
still have a whole wing of the ambassadorial halls that's animalian, it hasn't been touched or opened for over 100 years. And so they have kind of like a whole compound basically that was where the animalians used to be. And ever since they declared war, the animalians have not sent their ambassador.
I gotcha. Okay. That definitely helps, because I was like, wait, they're at war, but there's these ambassadors. That doesn't jive. Now I get it. They left. That
And so
makes so
that
much
was
sense.
a big thing, because not only did they leave the ambassadorial halls, but they left the whole organized religion. The the followers of the creator have their religion and their structure. They're the priests, right?
Mhm.
They're the representative of the creator on the planet of Valamir. And they have explained to everyone, the creator, the main god that you worship, the head god that you worship, is merely a face of the creator, a facet of him, so to speak. And so they have, here is the truth, here's the one true God. And they are the ones who kind of run the religion and the, the outreach and taking care of the poor and the orphans and things like that. And so when the Animalians had that disaster happen, and their old priests who said, here are our many gods who you have abandoned, and they have set upon us the spirit of revenge, and so happened to be represented by Sandstorm. So they were able to make that connection and say, we have to go back to the old ways. This is a false religion, and we need to go back to the true gods. And so they just kind of pulled away from all the things that unified these three people.
I see. I see. So, okay. So you said, so all right. So we've got the war. The war is going on. We've got the ambassadors that are trying. So it's more their parents that are trying to hammer out this peace, really, than them at this
They
point in
have
time.
a role, yes, and they're doing the actual negotiating, but there is so many people that are trying to trip it up, and so many people that are trying to tear it apart, that Jaden and Sihara have their own roles to play in order to be able to make this alliance happen, or rather prevent it from not happening.
Right.
Because, with Jaden and the evidence that he uncovers, there is a real risk that if this is found out, if it becomes public knowledge, that there's no way that even the people who support the alliance, that they would actually go ahead and go forward with it. So they have to fix this issue that he discovers, that his secret society discovers, um, with this weapons ring that is dealing weapons to the Animalians. And so the secret that he uncovers with this is enough that the Elementi might not, and the Mineralites might not agree to the alliance. And so he can't do it himself. And so he has to have Sahara help him to be able to take this weapons ring down. And that's just one of, I would say, about 3 different plots that they have to foil in order for this to be able to continue to go forward. And so you kind of get the behind the scenes look of what do all of the assistants to the ambassador do? What do all of the fixers do? And so that's kind of what I think is really fun about this, because while Sahara and Jaden's dad are the ones that are really public facing,
Mhm.
making this alliance happen with the different lords and ladies and Sakars and Kamdars, uh, Jaden and Sahara also are helping them to come up with strategies and helping them to be able to, like, one of the scenes, Jaden is going through this ballroom and he's picking specific people that he knows don't agree with the alliance and finding something that he can be able to get them to agree. And so he's actually going through and being like, hey, I know that your son is up for this promotion. What if I made sure that happened? Or, you know, hey, so and so, this worker representative Montgomery, um, what kind of things do I need to be looking out for the people that are in your area? Like, what kind of dirt do you have on them that I can use to get them to agree to the alliance? And with Sahara, what's really fun about her is I've kind of put the clues in there. She studies old court chronicles, which would be kind of analogous to our actual court records. So very dry and boring stuff, but she finds it very interesting. So she is very well versed in different strategies and different ways that people have forged alliances and treaties and mediations in the past. So she has her own perspective that she's able to bring to her father, even though her people don't really appreciate a woman's perspective. Her dad does, and so that's something that's a fun dynamic. Jaden's people are different in that it doesn't matter if you're a lord or a lady. If you are powerful and you have money and you're of noble descent, then they are happy to follow your lead.
That's true in the real world too, I think.
And so it's really a lot of fun to see the dynamic between the different people and to explore the different themes of, some of the mineralites think that they are superior, the elementees think that they are superior, but these behaviors actually don't make them superior people. It's kindness and compassion and the ability to work together and look beyond your prejudice or stereotypes that you might know. Those are the things that make you a better person. And that's just been a whole lot of fun to be able to explore those different themes in the story.
Now, there's definitely a lot going on. You've got the upcoming wedding, it seems, or there is it Hera and Sebastian. They're not married yet. They're
Yeah, so
intended.
through this whole thing, she's having to plan her wedding while the war is going on with all the shortages and with the alliance that is trying to be negotiated, all of the plots. She's also having to plan a wedding. And so that's also a lot of fun because oftentimes the scenes with her, the chapters with her, will start with something mundane like a dress fitting. And then by the end of the chapter, they're like running around trying to, like one of the scenes was there was an attack on a base nearby the Ambassadorial Halls. And so they're running around trying to get all of the doors and windows shut. And then she's pulled away to have a meeting with her dad. And so it adds certainly a layer of tension and constant stress for her. And then with Jaden having the secret society that, mind you, his best friend Sihara has no idea about the Scarlet Society.
Mm-hmm.
But he still has to get her help with the Scarlet Society without her knowing that he's working with her. So it's like, honestly, some of the most fun chapters to write are when he's in the middle of doing some sort of, being a spy master, and then she comes in to like have tea, and he's just like trying to not give anything away, or she'll say something offhand about like, I don't know why this guy wasn't at that meeting today, and you'll know as the reader why he wasn't at that meeting today. And he's like,
oh wow,
yeah, gee, I have no idea what could have possibly happened to that guy.
What could possibly have happened?
So
that's too fun. So go ahead.
What's really fun is you have these two kind of interconnected perspectives, and then every 2 chapters you get to follow Milo, and he unintentionally became kind of the star of the show, so to speak. He was exclusively in book 2. And I was reading this to my alpha readers, the book, and they're like, okay, but like, when's Milo's chapter going to be? I'm like, oh, he's not in book 1. And they're like, yes, he is. I'm like, well, no, he's going to be in book 2. And they're like, no, we are not going to wait that long for more of his story. You're going to have to put him in book 1. And so Milo's misadventures began. And so he is an absolute riot to write because he is very appropriately afraid of the dangers that are in the Outlands, but he still has to go and face this mad bandit king. He does not want to. But I'm not going to spoil it for you guys on what happens and why he has to go and chase after him. But he really has no other option but to go after this guy. And he's kind of the ultimate reluctant hero, and that makes him so much fun to write. The ridiculous situations that I put him in are absolutely so much fun.
For you, but probably not for him.
No, not for him.
So, all right. So you said that he's the A one. Can't think of
The
the
Animalian. Like
animal.
yeah, so you know the Kingdom of Animalia? So like the actual Latin like like when they call it like this is the animal kingdom. So Animalia is actually the name of that genesis of that grouping of animals. And so that's why I named them the Animalians.
Okay.
So they're
That
the
makes
animal.
sense.
And so it's mineral, element, animals based off of their magic system.
That makes sense. So we don't, all right, so we have to read to find out how his story interacts with Sihara and Sebastian and Jaden's story.
Yes, it's uh, honestly, it's a lot of fun, and I can't wait for you guys to get to that.
Is that in
Because
book one? Like,
there is some interaction in book one. It's mostly in book two. Um, but yes, there is some overlap that's going to be in book one. Um, and I think what's really fun about him is in the you get to see like the Animalian culture with their masks and their taking on animal traits and being like, you know, I am of the bear, so I am going to be strong and I'm going to be a builder. I am of the cat, so I'm going to be a paladin. I'm going to be a warrior. And, you know, I am of the bird, so, and they have their own specific names, but I'm of the bird, so I'm a messenger and a priest. And so they have these different caste systems, but in the Outlands, you throw all of that away. So you can be with like Milo, he's of the possum. So, you know, the creature that plays dead when it gets scared and whose bite strength is not very good but makes a really big loud show. And so it's extremely amusing to write him because he was raised this way. His dad chose that, gave him his mask once, and so he was born in the Outlands. And so it is extremely entertaining to write him and him trying to follow the ways of the possum. You get another character who follows the ways of the raccoon. And so I just have a lot of fun with it. He brings so much humor to an otherwise very serious story while also being some of the more high stakes chapters in actual physical peril that you get in the story.
oh wow. Just see.
And so we have a lot of different things going on, a lot of different threads that it's so fun to see
Yeah.
them all come together. Um, that's kind of why it ended up, I think, being a trilogy. And I'm really looking forward to publishing this book this coming year. I'm going to be publishing a new chapter uh, every other week. So you get part one, part two, and then you get a new chapter. So you get 2 chapters every month. And I'm going to be probably publishing this for the rest of this coming year, and part way into next year. Because it's by no means a small novel.
No, it sounds like it's over 100,000 words, or roughly 400 pages. Um,
Uh,
so
and
I will
then
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so then once you've published all the chapters on your website, you're then gonna publish it as an ebook or a paperback
Yeah, and so
only
you're
on
going to
your
be able to
website
get
or out in retailers as well?
out on retailers. So I'll be using digital to draft to
Draft to
publish the
digital.
ebook. Yeah,
Sorry.
um, draft to digital,
Yeah.
to publish that out on the different realtors. So it will be a full ebook. So part of the reason why I wanted to take everyone on this journey with me is, I mean, I've been writing this series, not this specific book, but this series for 12 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
some people write 10 different novels and they stick them in a drawer and they say, never going to see the light of day. I wrote 10, 15 different drafts of this novel series. And so that's where I cut my teeth as an author. And so I have been working on this for so long that I was just like, oh my gosh, there's going to be, now that I've gotten this final draft, I just looked ahead at the journey of even self-publishing with as quick as a turnaround as you can do. I'm just like, I really want to take everyone and I want to share this with as many people as I can. I want to take people on this adventure with me. And I know that there's going to be people that are going to follow along with every chapter. And there's going to be people that, like the people who wait for the whole series to be done before reading book one, they're going to wait for the ebook. But I wanted to build up a community, and I wanted to take people along with me on the adventure because my goal is to reach as many readers as I can, to have a community, and that to me is more important than any profit that I might have from the series, because I really have a passion for the story. And since writing is a hobby for me and not my day job, it gives me the freedom to be able to do that, to be able to share this story with everyone. And it's been so much fun to find, like, just I think it was a couple months ago, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just realized I'm publishing this chapter that has these two characters in it. And I was talking to my mom and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for everyone to meet these characters. Aren't they so much fun? And she says that she's purposely has been trying to like not listen to everything that I said about the story so she could experience it for the first time. And she was just like, oh, I don't know those characters very well. And I'm just like, I can't wait for you to meet these characters. And I just, throughout the day, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun. I can't wait for people to go on this adventure. And so that's kind of my real passion when it comes to this serialized fiction.
So if someone wanted to go to your website and read this right now, do they need to log in? Do they need any sort of special access to read it?
No, you can actually go and read it for free. If you guys want to, if you're really hooked and you get to chapter 9, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to read the next 2 chapters, you can sign up for $1 a month on my Ko-fi page, and you actually get the full 2 chapters at the beginning of every month ahead of time. So instead of having to wait for each little piece to be dripped out, you can actually read both full 2 chapters right away. So you have those 2 options when it comes to following the story.
And how many chapters ahead are you from readers in your writing?
So it's complicated, but basically I have
It
everything.
always is.
So I have everything ready through the end of March as of today. But Jaden and Sihara's chapters, even though it's all this political intrigue and court intrigue, they are easier to write. So they have probably have until September for them. It is Milo who is my problem child. And so he is more difficult and complex to write. And so he's the one holding up the show. But every time that I have a new chapter that I finish for Milo, I have 2 other Jaden and Sihara chapters that are already done. So that's the story there. Milo was the toughest character for me to get a handle on. Usually with characters, once I kind of come up with their concept, their backstory, their character traits, I'm like, oh, I get them. I can totally write them. Milo had to go through so many different revisions, so many different. I had to uncover so much of his history. I'm a discovery writer, so
Same.
the way that I write characters is I kind of discover who they are as the story goes along. And Jaden and Sihara were, I feel like, more plain to me. Their inner thoughts were like clearer. They were just like, "This is who I am. This is my story." And Milo was like, "Who's asking? Why do you want to know?" And so he's a little more tricky to motivate, which ends up being one of the reasons why there's more peril in his chapters than some of the other chapters, because it takes a lot to motivate him, because he's a very afraid, a very fearful, and I wouldn't say cowardly, because there's a lot to be afraid of in the Outlands. There's all kinds of monsters and creatures, and even plants can, and the environment itself is trying to kill you in the Outlands. So he's appropriately afraid, but that does hinder him a lot in that it has to be a very strong motivation for him to actually do something.
So wait, do those monsters that are in the Badlands, because the Ambassadorial Halls are also in those Badlands, do they try to get into the Ambassadorial Halls? Are Jaden and Sihara and Sebastian having to deal with their incursions?
So the monsters and things like that appear more deeper in. So there's kind of so the way that the Outlands work is it's a patchwork of crazy different environments. So you can be in a evergreen forest, take a step, and you're now in a rainforest or a desert or an icy tundra. So it's super bizarre patchwork, and the creatures tend to stay in their environment. And there's a reason for this. It's not just random, but nobody really knows the answer to this until I'm going to say probably book 2 or 3. Probably book 2 is where I'm going to be getting into more of the why are the Outlands so crazy? Why are there these monsters here? And why do they stay?
Oh, they're obviously getting some benefit from it, or they wouldn't be sticking around. But I guess we'll have to
So,
wait until 2025. That's when your book 2 is. Book 2 also are all the books in the trilogy gonna be dripped out 2 chapters a month on your website, or will at some
yes.
point you'll have to wait and pick up everything on retail?
No, it's always going to be dripped out. This specific series this is how I want um, to share it. So you're always going to be able to follow along with the adventures of Jaden, Sahara, and Milo as they're going through, and as different characters join the crew and the cast, you're going to be able to follow along with their stories on my blog. So I'm probably going to be publishing this particular universe at least for the next 3 to 5 years, um, depending on if I decide to start the next generation series right after I finish this first trilogy.
Oh, wow. Is that all you're writing, is Sahara, Jaden, Sebastian, and Milo's story?
At this current time, I do write a lot of short fiction, um, and I do publish that as well on my website. So if you go to my author site, I actually give you the link to that. That's kind of my other stories that I write. I have had more of those actually published in different anthologies and or just directly on my website. So this is the main series that I'm going to be publishing in, but you will see a lot of different short stories from different other kind of universes. Um, I have been writing and telling stories and coming up with stories pretty much since I could tell coherent stories. That's been my passion. And I was blessed with 4 amazing siblings who put up with me all the time and also enjoy storytelling. And so we have collaborative universes that we are still working on together and a bunch of different stories that I have worked on developing. But this one is the one that is the first one I would say, finished. I actually wrote the very first draft of the second book in 2010 during NaNoWriMo. And my mom, I was 16 at the time, and my mom told me, okay, I found this really cool thing called NaNoWriMo. So if you write a book in a month, I will let you, for every day that you actually hit your word count goal, you don't have to do any math homework. Because
Oh,
I'm homeschooled,
wow.
I'm a homeschool graduate, and math was my least favorite subject.
Go.
So this is an in process novel. So that means that I am publishing to you my final draft as a writer. And then I'm also sending this to my editor. So you're going to be able to kind of follow along and give feedback as I go. And I felt like that was the best way to be able to collaborate with my community. So let's say that you notice that somebody's eyes were green in one chapter and brown 5 chapters later. absolutely message me and let me know. If you have a question where you're like, hey, how does this work in the universe? And I don't have an answer, I'm going to come up with one and it's going to be in the next chapter. So it allows people to kind of experience that collaborative process that I've really enjoyed with all of my siblings and my alpha readers, to be able to be a part of creating this world and discovering the lore. So kind of they get to go on the discovery writer journey with me.
That's really cool. No, I think what you're doing is very cool, like publishing
Thank you.
it out in public. And it's just refreshing because that's where I started. I was publishing stories out just on my blog in 2015, and then I started publishing them as books. I still publish them as 4 chapters a week on Patreon. I don't recommend you do 4 chapters a week. It is a lot of writing when you're
Yes,
working
I can
full
imagine
time.
so.
It's a lot of commitment too if you're, if there's holidays or you have to babysit your almost 5-year-old nephew who just wants to play games and chase, and you have to chase him around and then come back after hours of that and like, okay, what were the characters doing? I cannot remember. What is my name? What day of the week is it? you know
Oh,
so
absolutely. That's crazy. I applaud you for doing that. That was super cool.
oh,
I feel like I'm
I felt
a
like that was the minimum that I could do, like, if because with
Mhm.
Patreon, you're asking people to support you, and
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
levels is there, I was like, I felt like 20 chapters a month, and months that have 5 weeks, there's well, months that it's either 16 if there's a week, if there's 4 weeks in a month, or some months are the days fall in a certain way, and there's 5 weeks in the month, and there's 20
Yeah.
chapters, and,
Well,
it's a
that's a good
lot.
way of completing novels
Yeah.
quickly, though. I feel like I always perform better with a deadline, and so that's also one of
Yes.
the reasons why I enjoy this is there's a lot more motivation, I feel like,
Oh,
when
yes.
you're publishing, and I'm like, beginning of December, before we got into, like, the holiday season, um, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I have all the way through January done." And then I stopped, I'm like,
I
"I
want
only have all
that.
the way through January done." So I was like, I have to set aside, I have to set aside some serious time. This is not playing around anymore.
I
And so that's
I
now we're through March because I was like, okay, okay, I've got it done. I
I
got some,
want that.
I've got
If
some stocked away.
I'm lucky if I'm at 1 chapter ahead, which has been rare lately with holidays and
Oh yeah, it's
work,
crazy.
and like I was writing some chapters by the seat of my pants and publishing them that day. These are not the finished drafts. I would love them to be, but with a full-time job, and I don't have a full-time editor that I can send chapters to as I write them. So these are very much
Oh,
not finished products.
I I am very blessed with a very multi-talented family, and I'm just gonna have to brag just a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
Sister is a extremely talented editor, and she doesn't, like, take other jobs. I'm trying to convince her, like, part of me wants to convince her to be like, "You need to start monetizing this. You're really good at this." And the other part of me is like, "No, you're mine. Nobody can have you." Um,
You
and
belong to
she
me.
Yes, exactly. Um,
I feel
and
that.
so I'm, like, so blessed to be able to have this multi-talented family. My brother and same sister, who's a really good editor, by the way, are also full-time um, designers. So they are able to do any of the different work, like design work that I need. Um, so, and with me having a background in marketing, I just feel like everything in my life kind of led to being able to be successful as an indie author. And I think I have my parents to thank for that a lot. And they saw early on, they're like, "You're a good writer. We're going to nurture this and we're going to give you the skills that you need." Um, and I'm always looking to improve. And I think that if you can have that humble perspective and remember that, I think there was a famous author who said, if someone tells you there's something wrong with your book, they're probably right. If they tell you how to fix it, probably wrong. But if you get a bad review that tells you, hey, this had this issue or that issue, being humble enough to uh, let the sting wear off, first of all, not respond, but also take that feedback in and see where you can grow from that. I think is a really important skill to have as an author, especially if you're going to be publishing it like we are on a Patreon or on a blog. Getting that feedback and that raw feedback from the readers is so valuable, and I really enjoy letting everyone in on kind of this creative process.
No, it's especially if you can get any sort of feedback, it's definitely cool. Definitely having feedback is great, as we do sometimes, as you said earlier, forget what color the characters' eyes are, where we even left them, what were they even doing.
Yeah, I do have a reference sheet of all the characters who are mentioned in the book, whether or not they're dead, or when they died in the book, um, and whether or not they actually appeared in the novel. Because when you're dealing with a whole court where this guy hates that guy, and I have to keep track of, okay, did Duncan kill Montgomery's brother, or was it his sister? You get to have some complications, and so that's definitely where things can get a little bit tangled up. I think I had one guy who was in the first draft of a chapter where he was like on this mineralite castle, and then one of my alpha readers pointed out that I used the same name in the next chapter where I was negotiating a treaty. So they're like, so is teleportation a new power you weren't going to tell us about? And I was like, oh,
Whoops. I forgot I left him there.
And so it's a lot of fun to be able to do this collaborative process, and you are getting close to finished chapters on the blog. I think the only edits that my editor sends are like, grammar, punctuation, and like, you need to explain this more. They
Yeah.
need to be convinced more thoroughly, especially with Milo's chapters. She's just like, okay, this makes sense that they throw down and have a fight here, but I feel like there needs to be more peril. And so I threw a dragon in the story there. So that's a fun chapter. She was
I
like, more
mean,
peril. I'm like, fine, I will add more peril.
that's what dragons are for, Just throw them in whenever you need a bit more drama.
Oh yes, that is sadly the characters. The characters may not be happy about it, but I was reading this book, and it's the third or fourth book in a series, and it's the one where the author was like almost like an apology to her fans, basically like, yes, the last book was brutal, so we're just gonna have kind of a Hallmark esque low peril sequel. It was the most intense book I read because I didn't know that it was a low stakes thing, so I was expecting at any minute for it to get like way more dramatic, because if I was the author, oh no, we'd be dealing with PTSD, we'd be dealing with flashbacks on a regular basis. There would be betrayals. Somebody would be mind brainwashed, and I was just like, I'm a mean author. I thought I was a nice author. I'm mean. Oh no. Because if it's for the drama, the characters shall go through it all.
Of course, the drama makes it all worth it. Is there
And I would
anything?
say,
Oh, go on.
yeah, I would say that if I were to just kind of give you guys an example, this is a clean story. So doesn't really have a whole lot, even though it's dealing with war and battles, and like I said, lots of characters die. It's not graphic. It's more dramatic, and it is a slow burn romance. So it's also if there is going to be any romantic scenes, it definitely is going to be a fade to black and a closed door. So it's very much so more focused on the adventure and the action, and the drama and the emotional impact that a lot of these things that are happening, the character growth that is happening, having to confront your long held beliefs and whether or not those serve you anymore. So, a lot more about the character growth, but with any story that I write, there is lots of romance. It's just a lot more of the slow burn variety.
Which is also good. Not everything can burn hot and fast and wild and out of control. And especially if you're doing this over a trilogy, if it burns too hot, too fast, they might burn out.
So it's a lot of fun to write, and I honestly am so looking forward to each of you getting to meet all the different characters. Jaden and his Scarlet Society. I have to say, just before I go, I would have to say my favorite character to write is one that you haven't met yet, and his name is Francis. And he is the sassiest character that I have ever written. And he is so, so much fun to write. And he is a part of the Scarlet Society. So you guys are, I think, in for a real treat. Each character and POV has their own kind of cast of characters that are around, that are supporting characters to the main character. And they're all really a lot of fun to write. And one of the tricky things about characters for me is a lot of times I will create them for a very specific purpose. So I'll be like, this is your job, this is your role in the story. And then they have a really awesome backstory. And then pretty soon I start thinking like, wow, this is like its own story. And so that's where we get a lot of the short stories that are set in the same universe. Right now, if you go to my website, you can actually get one of my short stories. It's almost novella length, and it's called Madman's Automatons. If you sign up for my newsletter, you can actually get that one for free. And there is a scene yet to be published in the actual story that this is based on. So it'll be really fun when this scene actually happens, because it actually happens simultaneous to the story, to the Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls. And there's a very specific scene where that kind of kicks off this short story. So if you read it, it won't give you any spoilers for the main story. It's just kind of a really fun companion tale that I started and ended up finishing over the last couple of years. So it's a lot of fun. And you kind of get a deeper insight into the country that Jaden came from.
That's so cool. And we're going to have all the links in the description. Amelia is going to send me all the links. That's her homework.
All the links.
Yes. Yeah, so you don't have to, we're not going to spell them out for you and make you write things down or do actual work. They'll be in the description or the show notes, depending on where you're watching. Is there anything else you want to say about the Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls or the short stories or anything else that we've talked about?
I just hope that you guys follow along with this journey and that you enjoy the story as much as I have writing it. And I would love to hear if you guys have any feedback, if you like any chapters, if you don't like any characters. I would love to hear your feedback and just share with me as you go along the journey about your thoughts and opinions.
That's very cool. I think that's so neat that you're writing this out in public and getting feedback on it. That's just so cool. Thank you for coming on here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun to be able to talk about this. I have been working along doing this. Like, I feel like writing tends to be a very isolated thing, even with having alpha readers or other writers that you can share things with. Being able to have a moment to talk about it and to dig into some of the stuff that I've created over the years has been really fun. I really appreciate you for letting me come on here and talk your ear off about it.
No, I love this. That's why I started doing these. I love hearing about I'm such a book nerd. I like hearing about other people's books, hearing them talk about their books, read their books. So this is sort of a treat for me. I ran out of a family dinner early to make sure that I could do this. So thank you very much for pushing this back an hour so I could do both and not upset my mother who's not listening to this. She does not listen to this podcast. But I love you, Mom. You know, if any of my cousins are listening. Make sure you tell her that I said that. No bad mouthing mothers on this podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, no, and you're welcome to come back and talk about, short stories or anything else, this is a fantasy podcast, so anything fantasy goes.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I definitely will take you up on that.
Sure. Yeah, I know we're trying to get repeat visitors to come back so we can hear progress. So you made some claims in here about when you'll be publishing the next book. So we'd love you to come back and we can find out if you were correct in your
My
whatchamacallit.
estimations.
Yes, it estimations. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I really enjoyed this. And it was really
Oh, me
nice to get to know
too.
you too.
Yeah, no, and it is such an isolating thing writing. You're lucky that you have betas and alphas and things and other authors to talk to about it. I'm just in my cave writing and it's just me. I don't have any of that. So these podcasts are my way of like spending a little bit of time with a fellow author and talking about our common issues with it. Characters who need proper motivation. I know
Yes.
all about that. And some characters have too much motivation. Don't
Oh
want to
yeah,
stick
some
to the
characters
plot.
like Francis, I'm telling you right now, this guy, he just shows up and is like, "Hello, here's my backstory, here's all my secrets. Write my story." I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not a main character." And he's like, "Who are you to decide whether I'm a main character
Yeah.
or not? Rude."
Mhm. Yeah. The characters who hijack the book, and I'm not going to go into that because I'll complain about my current whip, which is basically characters show up and interrupt another story, forcing me to do a crossover when I said I was not going to do any more of these. And yet I am doing another one, and it's even bigger than the last one.
Go figure, right?
Yeah, I hope that you won't have that come up. That can be a lot of plotting, and especially being a discovery writer like I am, that can be very difficult to write.
Oh yeah, no, that's honestly, I think you actually described a little bit of that's why this series has been so tricky is um there's so much of these crossover and there's such a large cast of characters um and all of them want their time to shine. And so it goes from being one book to being two books to being a trilogy and even going as far as cuz I have a tendency to write kind of multi-generational stories.
Mm.
So that's where you start to get into I'm like, okay, well, I can't just make up anything now because that's going to affect the next trilogy. And so you do get with a lot of complications. I totally agree. As a discovery writer, it's kind of like there's so many details to discover.
Yeah, and I don't do the multi-generational thing. It's just I have multiple series that take place in the same world at the same time,
Oh,
which
that can be tricky
I
trying to make sure
deeply
everything lines up.
yeah, I deeply regret letting the characters talk me into that one, because then if they show up in each other, they live in the same country, so if they wander into each
Mm.
other's story, when I go back to their story, I'm like, okay, I have to account for them being in this place, doing this thing, and somehow make this work in their story. And
And also,
yeah,
like the reader doesn't get confused. Oh, that's so
yeah,
tricky. Like
yeah. And some of them can teleport, but when they go back and
oh
forth to
shoot.
certain places, because I have a couple of characters who are technically not alive and they're going back to different planes of existence, there's a time differential, and
Oh boy.
it starts to
Yeah.
break my brain.
Oh, that is tricky. Oh, I actually wanted to I would love to chat with you about, your stories sometime too, this, just,
Sure,
informally,
sure.
because this sounds like a lot of fun.
It is it is definitely it is fun.
Fun,
It's
but not maybe
like
that's not the word you'd use.
while I'm writing it, like I'm very like there's flow state, and then there's like I'm gonna make these characters get to the end of this scene or this book, so it stops driving me crazy, and then there's rereading it and enjoying it upon rereading it, in forgetting how much of a grind it was to get
Oh,
all of this to
yeah.
and in this current thing, they break the timeline, and like time is like it slips out of
Oh, no.
joint, so characters experience things that trying to deal with that was just That's my current
That's
nightmare.
the slipstream effect. Oh yeah, that's tricky. That's a yeah, that would be really interesting to read. I'm looking forward to learning more about your books too.
Okay, you may regret that. There's a lot of them. You may regret saying that. There are a lot of them.
I'm a fast reader too, though.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, we could definitely talk informally. Like, let you know what, let's bring this podcast to a close, and then we can you can come back and we can talk informally about it on the podcast. Just all content is content. I'm an introvert, so I don't really talk so much about my stuff unless people are like asking me questions about it. And I have a hard time filling more than like 20 minutes about my own books because I'm just it's so in my head that,
Oh yeah. No, that's what I was
yeah,
telling you when I was sharing you the trying to write a blurb for it or description for it, and then somebody's like, "This is too long." I'm like, "It is the best that you are. Is the shortest that you are going to get from me."
right. And for me, like, I read a few sentences in the blurb, I'm like, that's not enough of a blurb. And I was like, well, this is the best I can do to summarize the shenanigans that go on in this book.
Exactly.
Anything more than this and it'll get too complicated. This is a broad strokes. Take it or leave it.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for having me on. I really
Yeah, no, thanks
enjoyed
for coming.
talking with you, and I look forward to continuing our book friendship.
Yes, yes. And thank you all so much for listening too. This has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. And today we had Amelia Nichole. She joined me to talk about her book, not the Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls, and also some of the short stories that she has written. And we've got all sorts of links so you can go and check it out. I hope you will. It sounds really amazing. So thank you. And we'll be back next week with another episode, another fantasy author, and I hope you'll check us out. Make sure to follow, like, whatever, so that you get notified when the next episode drops. Thank you so much.